Hey everyone, welcome to the Fargo 3D Printing Show today. Jake Clark and John Schneider. We are going to cover a great topic today of 3D systems and everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, our opinions, our dealings. An article came out about a couple weeks ago, a 3D printing industry that talks, it's like a 27-page article that goes into 3D systems, and we're going to kind of step through that and add our opinions and thoughts into this article as well, and what we've dealt with and what we've seen and heard other people deal with. So, starting out, and then at the end we'll read some of these comments because the comments are good.
Yeah, so I mean, the big thing here is that the CEO of 3D Systems, Avi Reichental, stepped down about a month ago. Somewhere in there.
29th, October 29th?
Yeah, so he's been the CEO of 3D Systems for about 12 years. And there's a lot of people that would say a lot of the hype of 3D printing was attributed to Avi. Now, we're not talking the RepRap stuff. When you look at a company like MakerBot, for example, they started out as RepRap. And I mean, they really pushed the envelope forward. But in the last couple of years, when you look at coverage of CES, or any of the mainstream press coverage of 3D printing, a lot of it had to do with 3D systems and 3D systems technologies, and usually Avi was the one who was leading the charge behind this. Now, over the last year, 3D printing stocks, in particular 3D systems and Stratasys, have taken a huge nosedive. Jake, I think you have the numbers in there from what their peak was to where they're at now.
Their peak was somewhere just shy of $100, I believe. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but the number that I have here is today, as of today, the 25th, it is $9.47 per share, $9.47.
Yeah, and I know at one point it was in that 90, mid to high $90 range. So in 12 to 18 months to go from that type of valuation back down is, I mean, it's a big deal. There's a lot of people that have lost money on this, and there's actually an open lawsuit against Avi Reichental right now for misleading investors.
We can get to that part.
Yeah, so we're going to try and follow along this article.
Jumping around.
Going to try and follow around in here, but yeah, just wanted to give you a little background on just why we're even covering this.
Yeah, so there's a graph in this article that shows their stock pricing, and so this you could kind of relate to their hype, which kind of started around September 2013, and it's ended probably it's kind of started to plateau on the bottom December of 2014, and it keeps going down now, but that's kind of the range within this stock price graph, if you want to say. The time frame we were looking at. So January 2014 was an interesting year. We didn't go to CES that year because we just started the company, and so we heard all these cool things happening at CES. Will.i.am became their creative
chief creative officer,
which was interesting. They had a whole band that was 3D printed. They had the Chef Jet, they had the Sarajet, they had the Cube Pro and Cube 3.
And they also had a Cube Jet there. So the Chef Jet, that's the full color sugar 3D printer. Sarajet, that's a ceramic 3D printer. What was the other one? The Cube Jet full color. So that was a big thing, a full color 3D printer in the $5,000 price point. And of course the Cube Pro and the Cube 3.
And the big thing was the sugar ceramics and the full color binder jet one,
which were all said to be releasing within the next 12 months. Now, more than 12 months has passed since that point. This was January 2014. Well, CES for January 2015 happened last year, and we're coming up on 2 years from that first event.
And we were told that it was supposed to come out the end of this year by the 3D Systems reps. And so all this technology really started to, I think, fuel this hype cycle when he made these announcements back in January. And because we were really excited about it, because they're great machines, and I think they're going to be, if they ever come, and that's a big thing of if, and we'll get into that, they're going to be great machines. But
we're pretty sure they're going to be great machines. So what we're hoping right now is that 3D Systems doesn't, because this is in the article too, but they have a track record for pushing out a product before it's ready, and I think they're trying to avoid that mistake with their new systems. But yeah, we'll keep going through this article.
And so before they had even made any of these announcements in January, they had purchased 45 different companies between 2010 and 2014. That's about 9 a year about. So that's a big expenditure to do that. And it sounds like, after reading through some of the Glassdoor stuff and some of the rest of these articles, it sounds like they're all poorly managed.
It's kind of like trying to manage, everything's being managed to a degree, but they're not managed. They're not integrated at all.
And they're buying struggling companies is what it sounds like. They're not buying like, all right, that's a great thing. That's a great product out there. Let's buy that company because it's profitable and it actually makes money. And what they're buying is they're buying things that are like struggling and they can't get going because either they have a half-baked product and then they bring it on and then they don't do anything. Now, some big corporations are known for buying technologies and shelving it and just saying, yep, that's cool, we're going to buy that and we're going to shelve it because it competes with this thing over here.
Right.
And they did that with Quick Parts and Print3D because Print3D was CAD software plugin designed to generate production costs for 3D printers with parts. And they took that and they took it and then they didn't do anything with it because they bought Quick Parts, which was essentially the same thing.
Yeah, so Quick Parts, basically a 3D printing service bureau. And that other, what was the other company called? Print3D?
Print3D was the other one. In 2011, this happened.
Yeah.
And so, and there was a lawsuit and it actually went through, and Ronald Barnaco, if I'm saying that name correctly, actually got about $11 million payout because of that, about $11.2 million payout, because they just took it and they didn't do anything with it.
And that was after he'd been promised that there would be development put into the software. He'd be heading up a whole division.
Yes.
And yeah, 3D Systems just does a very poor job, or at least they appear to do a very poor job of integrating these smaller companies. A lot of times, the smaller companies, they have a much different culture than a large corporation like 3D Systems. I think 3D Systems, we can say, has that larger corporate culture, which, you know, that's, I think they say in the article, it's, you know, your khaki or your Dockers and polo crowd, basically. And then you have your more startup, more 3D printing startup guys, I'd say more like us, you know, your jeans and t-shirt type of people. And it just, there's that, it's very disjointed. And it seems like the management is in their own
school.
Yeah, and they're in their own world, that they're just not connected with the people that they're managing. It just doesn't seem like everyone's on the same page with everything.
Yeah, and you know, what was I gonna say? Oh, with their management, that's one thing with the Glassdoor reviews was that.
And Glassdoor, just for background for people, Glassdoor is where employees or former employees can go and rate their employer. This is most effective for larger companies where they have more employees. There's maybe more turnover. Something that's maybe an 80-person company, you're not going to have a Glassdoor rating, but a 500, 1,000-person company, you're going to have Glassdoor rating. So if you're looking to get hired by one of these companies, that's where a lot of potential hires go and look, is Glassdoor, to see, okay, well, what's the culture like? What's management like there?
They have like a 2.5-star rating.
Yeah.
I'll even try and pull it up here. 2.4?
Yeah, and that 2.4 star rating, some people suggest that that's even overinflated, that it's really lower than that the 5-star or 4-star ratings that are on there are just shills for the company. And there's some things that would cause people to be suspect about that, like the positive rankings or positive ratings are posted in consecutive days, which just doesn't seem like that would be, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it would be the actual case if you had employees that were giving 5-star ratings. So I don't know, it just...
Yeah, 3D Systems 2.4, 101 reviews, 104 salaries posted, and 12 interviews posted on 3D Systems alone. And so, I mean, work environment is kind of what makes and breaks a large corporation. You look at somebody like Google, which has a very, what I would say, laid back and very...
But even that's becoming more corporate now.
But still, you still have that more of not of a corporately structure like what you see in like old movies and stuff, but you see it as more of a fun place to be. But yes, it is becoming more corporate. But this sounded like it was even something where it's sucking the joy out of it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the people mentioned or referenced in this article said the work environment is a place without joy or pride, because really no one...
It sounded like they had a lot of micromanagers in there, where you had a bunch, you had somebody
actually,
with a...
I think it's the opposite of that. It's not even that there are micromanagers, it's that no one's guiding anything.
Well, you have a bunch
like
of
the management is
VPs
dysfunctional.
and managers and this and that
Well, right.
are just a name tag so that they can get a higher dollar.
Because what did it say in here? There's like 40 plus VPs, dozens of chiefs of.
Yes.
You know, so chief of, I don't know, innovation, or like Will.i.am, chief creative officer. Who has a chief? I mean, okay, fine. Maybe there are people out there with a chief creative officer, but what did Will.i.am do aside from
bring a name to it that doesn't
aside from
really
being in a few videos? He doesn't have background in the 3D printing industry. I mean, what did he really bring to help move 3D Systems forward aside from that name? It just seems like a lot of the moves that 3D Systems did is what they thought, this will get the kids interested in 3D printing. And I mean, kids are already interested in 3D printing. You don't need to have Will.i.am. It just seemed so artificial.
It seemed cheesy.
Yeah. Well, and then this comes down to just a lot of the employees feel frustrated about how things are run at 3D Systems. So we're resellers of 3D Systems. So we've had to deal with some stuff. Like the Cube Pros and the Cube 3s, for example. They can be great machines, but some of those machines just don't work as well as they should. I mean, for example, if they would have just had an open filament format and had the printers be more open instead of trying to go...
You're wasting so much money as a manufacturer, because think about it. When a filament cartridge goes bad, what do? They send you out another one. Okay, you have to cover the shipping, they have to cover the material and the cartridge, and they don't even request it back. So all of a sudden, now you're sending a $100 filament spool to a customer to reuse that. If you would have just had an open spool, you wouldn't be losing out on that money. And it's frustrating because they don't see that. If you would just say it's open and you can use whatever filament you want, you would A, cut some losses out of that filament, and B, well, that's the biggest thing, is just cut the losses on the filament so you don't have to charge so damn much.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is when we would talk to support techs, and even people that were managing our channel and our account, you could just feel the frustration that they had with upper management. Support, for example, they wanted to be able to do stuff just to make, help the printers work better, but they had their hands tied because of some policy that someone not even in the division really, they came up with this policy. Okay, so a really good example is the Cube Pro. So the print.
It's a great nightstand.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, the print, it kicks
it's a great machine.
It kicks out great prints. That is maybe
software.
It wouldn't even be such a big deal if it didn't kick out good prints. If it performed horribly, it was built horribly, whatever. But it's a great platform that can make good prints, and the software even ended up improving, but it's completely hindered by being closed source. It doesn't even use traditional G code. So you can't even go in and try and troubleshoot what's wrong with it. You have to go through support. And support, I don't know if they were just being overwhelmed or if it was from policy higher up that was causing either unresponsiveness or just an inability to fix what needed to be fixed. But it in a lot of cases just amounted to a large paperweight that, again, really frustrating knowing what it's capable of, and yet it just sits there and you're not able to print anything with it. And back to the whole filament cartridge thing, I mean, we've had, I think just even for our own demo unit, we'd have about maybe 10 to 20% failure rate on the cartridges. And the reason it would fail, it's not because the filament inside was bad, it's not even that it was tangled, it's that the chip in the cartridge would be bad. And so we'd contact Cubify support, and for stuff like that, they were pretty responsive, sending that new filament out. But like you said, Jake, if they would have just charged a reasonable amount for the filament, or had it be open, or even have their own, do what MakerBot does, have a proprietary spool format, but have the ability that if you want to put your own filament in there, you can put it in there, fine, it voids the warranty. But with the Cube Pro, you can't even do that. Same thing with the Cube 3. The Cube 3 is one of the fastest FDM printers that I've seen. It also has some of the best print quality, but it's hampered by the filament cartridges. The amount of times that, well, it's not even that they jam up, it's that the price of operating it is so high. I would have been fine paying twice the amount of money for a Cube 3 if I could have used what filament I wanted. Or even saying, okay, fine, you can void it.
Schools don't want to adapt it because they have a budget and they want to find the best bang for their budget. And it's not a Cube 3 and it's not a Cube Pro because they have to spend so much money on that cartridge just to get a print.
And ultimately, a lot of this comes down to, I think it comes down to Avi's guidance. So Avi had said on multiple occasions that he believed that every household would have a 3D printer. And I'm sure that that's what he believed. But if you look at every household, not even every household has a toaster and a microwave, let alone having a 3D printer in their house. And, you know, an inkjet printer, okay, I think that that's maybe the analogy he was trying to use, and that's fine, but you can't use the same razors and blades. You can't use that same model with I mean, if it doesn't work. I mean, with an inkjet printer now, okay, it's to the point where you just put the ink cartridge in, it just works.
Yeah.
And there's just more application for a 2D printer, an inkjet printer in the house than there is a 3D printer. And Avi, he was wrong on that. He thought that every house would have a 3D printer, and I don't see it happening in the next 5 to 10 years. And even if it does, it's going to be the same thing with inkjet printers. You'll have a cheap, really inexpensive 3D printer that you're going to use a dozen times a year, and that's it.
I mean, you're getting somewhere with like the Da Vinci's and the XYZs where they're more approachable for the home user. I mean, it's like computers in the 90s. There's some models that are more approachable, but you have to tinker with them, and that's the thing. But they just did a poor execution of doing this because they closed everything off where you couldn't do anything with it.
Well, at least the Da Vinci, they've come out with a model now.
Yeah.
I mean, they've come out.
I was going back to 3D Systems saying that
sure.
they close everything off. But no, Da Vinci's doing it right. Where, hey, we had closed filament. You know, we see the potential for this machine selling more if we just open the spools up to have whatever.
And they did, and they're charging 30% more for the printer, but that's fine. People are willing to pay that for the ability to use whatever material that they want. Mm-hmm. I mean, even hacking the Cube Pro. I mean, there's some people that have done it, but really to do it effectively, you almost need to replace all the electronics in it. And the Cube Pro, when it first came out, it had a pretty high failure rate too, just, you know, dead on arrival printers. We didn't really run into that too much. We had one system out of about a dozen, but
yeah, but otherwise the other ones were good.
Yeah, they worked great out of the box. I mean, when they work well, I mean, pretty fast printer, really good print quality.
We had one engineer that it was pretty much dead on arrival, and then, you know, once we got it working for him, it worked great for him. You know, and he did a really well job with that cube, and but if that's 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 15, and we're just one reseller, that's a bad ratio.
I feel like there is so much squandered potential in 3D Systems right now. I mean, they brought on, well, it looks like they're closing down one of their facilities.
I think they're also shutting down part of their Cubify stuff.
Yeah, so they're letting go. Okay, so it looks like. Here, in this part of the article, it says, on Monday, November 16th, the Cubify group at 3D Systems headquarters in Rock Hill, South Carolina was also let go. Now, there was an update following up on that and saying, I still have not heard back from 3D Systems on Cubify, but one anonymous commentator has said that the entire Cubify unit has not been let go, but that some were given until the end of the year and that none were escorted out in the manner described to me. So at the beginning in this article, it said that the Cubify group was just let go. They couldn't leave. They couldn't even grab any of their belongings. So it seems like that's been proven false. But it doesn't look very good for the Cubify range of printers.
No, it doesn't look good for any of their desktop or even some of their professional stuff. They just closed their Massachusetts plant, which was ProJets and
not just ProJet, but it was a lot of the
Sarajets, the Chef. I think it was the same technology that's used in the ChefJet.
A lot of the powder-based stuff.
Yes.
So a lot of their CJP color jet printing technologies were based and manufactured in this facility. Now, at the same time that's happening, when they're closing that down, just before this, they opened up a new facility in California. Where was it? Like Los Angeles, Sacramento, something like that. And what they're doing is they're trying to say, okay, they're trying to move. It's like a culinary center. So they're focusing on the ChefJet printers. I think it has 6 ChefJet printers in there.
LA.
They're trying to focus on, here, Jake, you're closer in that article.
The grand opening of the 3DS Culinary Lab, groundbreaking new culinary innovation center in the epicenter of LA culinary community.
And the thing is, we don't even, it's just, I suppose that was already in motion and you can't just stop that. It's like, I'm sure they already spent the money on it. They can't just not spend the money on it now. But now if they have this culinary center open, trying to push out the ChefJet, well, they better make damn sure that they have ChefJets available for purchase. Otherwise, you're going to
I've already had 5 or 6 people say, when that comes out, I want it. And we're more than happy. I'm just waiting for it to come out now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, there's so much potential, but execution has been piss poor. And I think what's happening is again, everyone talks about the management, and I believe it's the management because what you have now is you have a technology that's very new and innovative, and it's moving very rapidly. What you have at the head of the company is a very old school, old generation of individuals that are very good at business stuff, but they're not good at adapting to what's new and upcoming. You need to change very quickly with the 3D printing. You need to pivot. And they have so much baggage with all these companies that I think what they need to do is just say, all right, here's our 45 companies. We need to have somebody to manage these and just run them. And they have somebody, but they're not letting them run with it. That's the poor thing, is they're not saying, here's your company that you're going to go with. Run with it and see it. If I don't see the checks in the mail, I'll come back and see what's going on.
Well, and I think what's happening is that, it's not just 3D printing that this is a problem with, but you see this in technology companies where they acquire a different company and, how do you assimilate that company into your company and make it so that everything works together and makes sense, make it so that it becomes a better feature. So Google is, I think, pretty good at this. One example is when they acquired the traffic company, or not traffic company, but the navigation company, Waze. So Waze, you could, I remember in that app, you could say, okay, hey, there's a cop here, there's a speed trap here, there's an accident here, and you would report it in the app. Well, now Google has all that information, but it gets brought into Google Maps. So that's one way that they're able to combine that. But Google is, they've been doing this for a while. 3D Systems, yeah, they've been buying companies for a while, but it doesn't seem like they've figured out how to integrate anything. It's like before they got one plate fully spinning in the air, they threw another 2 plates up in the air and tried to get those spinning. So they had a lot of plates, and it just all seems to be crashing down right now. Because before, they're all floating on a little bubble of hype, and that was fine. And you had a lot of people, I think you just had a lot of people investing in 3D printing companies. You'd have and when I say uneducated, I don't mean stupid people. I'm just saying uneducated in this industry, saying, oh, 3D printing seems like it's a big deal. I better buy some 3D printing stocks. Well, there's only so many out there, 3D Systems being one of them. Now, these people buying the stocks overinflated the share price much higher than their profits to their P&E ratio.
It was like 17 times revenue at the highest.
Yeah. And
that's absurd.
And what happens then is that reinforces the management that whatever they're doing must be good. Because if the share price is going up, then what they're doing must be making sense. So it's almost like they create their own fallacy. They put out this story of, okay, this is this is where 3D printing is going. This is what it is. This is what it has the potential to be, and this is what we're making it. And then that is reinforced by people buying into that story and putting money into the company. And then it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy until it's not. And I mean, the thing is, we're not seeing this just in 3D Systems as far as as far as stock valuations or anything like that. I mean, we're riding that hype cycle. I mean, I think we've just gone over the peak, and now we're going to start coming down into the trough of disillusionment. So people are going to start coping with the reality of what 3D printing is and where it's actually going to be useful and how many people are actually going to be buying 3D printing stuff. Now, that being said, it's still a growing industry. It's still a massively growing industry. It's just, it's not this utopia where everyone has a 3D printer in their house and they're making everything in their household that they need. That's just not the case.
No, it's not. Some people it is. There's some people out there that are making everything in their house. But that
doesn't mean they should, or it's the best thing to be using. I mean, just because you've got a hammer doesn't mean everything's a nail.
Depends.
Well,
depends on how big that hammer is.
I suppose it depends on how big the hammer is, yes. But then it's a very expensive hammer.
Yes. Well, you can go down to Harbor Freight, get them for cheap. Okay.
I guess we should go back to the article.
We got off the rails somewhere.
Well, we knew it was going to happen. We tried. I mean, I think.
But it's going to be interesting, with the whole Cubify thing and which is that department. It's going to be interesting to see where the Cubify line goes. It's going to be very interesting to see what the CES looks like this year, and actually talk with some of the people, especially after this, to see what their plan is, because they realize that they're kind of in an oh shit moment, and they need to figure out where they're going. So I'm curious on what their plan is. Are they going to keep going with Cubify? Are they going to go just back to their bread and butter with bigger machines and focus on that?
I think whatever they have, they need to just make it work. Honestly, from what I've been picking up on from this article, from the Glassdoor reviews, almost all of the top management just needs to be turned over. I mean, you need to get the people running these smaller companies within 3D Systems. You need to have people from within those companies running them. You almost need to let them operate independently and just let stuff work and have the IP between those companies be shareable. I mean, okay, I've not led a company of that size before, so it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. It's really easy to look at what happened over the last 12 years and say, oh, well, if they would have just done this differently and this differently.
All these circumstances.
Right, exactly. So I guess we should have really prefaced this entire discussion with that is we're resellers, so we get some of it. We understand and we've been able to pick up on the situation from some of our cues, from some of our direct contacts within 3D Systems. But a lot of the stuff that's covered in here, some of it's conjecture. Some of it is a lot of it's based in fact, but a lot of it is based on anonymous tips. So just take that for what it's worth, because that does bring us down to. Okay, well, you finish first, and then we'll get down to the
because you
section.
talked about these smaller companies working together, and something like what Stratasys kind of has with MakerBot is kind of a very unique system where Stratasys is over here doing their thing of industrial machines, and some of those prosumer machines. And then you got MakerBot over here doing their own thing, but they're collaborating in the middle where they can. They overlap where they have to,
right?
And where it makes sense. And I think that is the way that it should, that 3D Systems should try and move. And again, maybe it's that management that it's just stuck in their ways. I mean, I've met some people that have been in manufacturing outside of 3D printing that has even said, yeah, we were stuck in our ways for the last 12 years or 5 years or whatever. I didn't want to do that. But once we figured out that, yeah, we should do that and it worked great. So it's just, it's realizing that, hey, we need to make a change and do that.
And I think a big part of this comes down to the board of directors of 3D Systems. I'm sure a lot of them have substantial shares in 3D Systems. Why it took them so long before making a change in management, I don't know. But I just hope that they make a good choice that will actually help move the company forward. Because that's the one thing with 3D printing companies, and we say this about a lot of Kickstarter stuff too, we don't want to see a company fail. And again, it's really easy to comment from the outside, but ultimately we want these companies to thrive. Because, like for example, the 3D Systems stuff, we want to see the Chef Jet out. We want to see the Sarah Jet out. We want to see the Cube Jet. Sugar printing, ceramic printing, and full color printing at a relatively reasonable price point. I mean, who doesn't want that? But for that to happen, the company needs to be successful. And it just, I hope that they get things figured out. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the comments on this. So the first one, pretty simple comment, just says, "Great work, Michael. A fascinating story and a cautionary tale of mismanagement. Oh, and the hype, the crazy hype." So we addressed that a little bit earlier. I think we're getting past a lot of that hype now and getting into the reality of 3D printing. So, that's good that we're getting through that. But the big comment on here, and the one that started a whole kind of, firestorm of follow-up comments, is this one by Ron Hollis. So Ron Hollis, just a little background, he was the founder of QuickParts.com and served as the CEO and president, I believe, of QuickParts. So QuickParts ended up being acquired by 3D Systems. That's that 3D printing service bureau arm of 3D Systems. So he starts talking about, he gives a little bit more of a personal, a personal, not critique, but just reference on
this
Avi.
article?
Yeah.
Well,
so,
he gives a little bit of background into a few things. He kind of gives the story a little bit more meat, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's a great comment on there because it does give a little more background, but I don't know.
Where do you want to start with that comment?
Because he starts, I don't know, because it's a long comment. Let's just start reading it and then we'll pick it apart as we go. Otherwise, I'd hate to skip past something important. Okay, so this is the quote or the comment by Ron Hollis. So, to provide another side of the story so that it has some balance. I have read many of your articles, referring to Michael, the author of this article, over the past few years, and I find them limited in accuracy and unbalanced. In my opinion, it was so many horribly inaccurate articles, my favorite being China 3D prints a building, which helped pump up the hype. For the non-technical or untrained reader, they just assume that it's accurate. I unsubscribed from the Wall Street Journal after reading so many inaccurate stories, so you are not alone. So, I mean, I kind of get that. 3D printing has been sensationalized a little bit. So for example, that China 3D printing buildings, they 3D printed parts of a building, and then that building was later assembled. So they weren't 3D printing entire buildings on site, but they would have, it's almost like precast concrete.
It's like precast.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get what he's coming from there. And Michael...
But precast is pretty cool, though.
Well, and Michael does have a tendency, I mean, you definitely know he's more on the open source side of things. Whenever there's anything closed source, he provides a critique of it, which is fair, but I mean, he does lean a little bit in that direction. But I don't think as far as Ron, I don't think he leans so far that direction as Ron Hollis seems to indicate. Okay, so continuing on. As for 3DS and Reichental, it's easy to demonize the CEO after he has moved on without providing appropriate appreciation for the role. I have known Abe, Avi is sometimes known as Abe.
Yep.
I've known Abe since he became CEO, and my relationship with him is between us. However, as the CEO, one should appreciate that he had some very difficult challenges to overcome in order to even be able to be demonized by you 10 years later. He took over a destitute company, 3D Systems, that was on the brink of bankruptcy. They had not invested in R&D for years, continued to erode their customer base with poor customer service, operated in a tiny market, 3D printing back then was way less than 1 billion, and had formidable competition from Stratasys and eventually Objet because of Stratasys, DSM Somos, etc. So he moved the headquarters across the country to get out of California and into a more reasonable environment to operate. This move was super high risk. He built a nice HQ that was cutting edge and represented the vision that he had for the company, technology leader. He started the roll-up of the service bureaus so 3DS could be a leader in the parts business. This was the most difficult decision as the CEO since it was a burning the bridges decision for the company. This decision would never be made by many CEOs in the same situation, even some that told me they would never compete with their customer but are doing it now. It took courage and leadership to make the decision. So I'm going to pause on that one for a second because... So I get this. I get that Avi had vision, and I'm not going to say, I mean, I did say earlier that Avi's vision was wrong, and I think it is flawed. I just don't think he needed to acquire 45 companies to achieve that vision.
Why would you acquire Little Giants?
Well, and I think
like something like that. Why?
I
use your machines.
And I think what they were trying to do was to replace, in lieu of doing their own R&D, they were acquiring other companies that had innovated and had clearly done, had invested heavily in R&D. So it's like they were acquiring that. It's just after that acquisition happened, it seemed to be poorly managed. Another thing in here is where they said that they would never compete with their customer. So we already know that that's something that 3D Systems has started to do a little bit. We know of, not necessarily us, but some other resellers, they have been undercut on deals by 3D Systems. I mean, that is a burning your bridges move right there.
Oh,
I mean, if 3D Systems wants to do direct, okay, fine. Go hire your own sales force and sell directly then on the big systems.
But do it and don't burn, because Form Labs does that. They sell direct, which is fine, but they didn't come in saying, all right, we're going to have resellers. All right, now we're going to compete with you.
Yeah.
And they didn't go that route. They just said, all right, we're going to do direct to start with. Right. And that's fine, and maybe they'll add resellers later. But like you said, it's a bad decision to burn those.
All right, so the next bit of this comment, a short synopsis why the decision needed to be made, the decision to roll up these 3D printing service bureaus, or why 3D Systems acquired so many of them. When 3DS committed to roll up the service bureau business, it lit the fuse for the industry to break out of the malaise of the previous decade and forced innovation to the end users, where the real dollars reside. What folks don't realize is that the lack of innovation out of 3DS and other 3D printing companies had created a vacuum in the service bureau market where there was no incentive for a service bureau to buy new equipment, materials, or service from 3D. Those that wanted to expand would buy used equipment and retrofit to the latest lasers and software. This was a huge problem for the future of 3D. It was also a disservice to the end user in that they were continuously being served by various levels of quality from various modernization of the equipment. This is actually a complex story for another time, but it's a major challenge that threatened the future of the company. So basically, because they weren't innovating. They weren't coming out with new machines. The people that were using these machines saw no reason to get. There wasn't even a latest and greatest version of the machines. There was no reason to buy a new machine. So I think that's where you started to see some of the smaller companies pop up. And I mean, you look at something like Z Corp. I think Z Corp popped up. No one was really doing that type of 3D printer before. And all of a sudden you had these 3D printing service bureaus that saw, oh, hey, here's this new printer. We're definitely going to go and buy this to complement everything else that we have. But our current stuff that's doing the SLA and the MJP, we're just going to keep maintaining that. We're not going to buy new equipment. So that was causing an issue.
But do you think that's I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think that is something that they as in 3D Systems should have just said, all right, we're gonna try and make the latest and greatest next thing in our R&D department instead of buying all these other ones?
Well, I think this was mentioned in the article, but they came out with a printer and they pushed it out too soon. I forget the name of it.
Oh, that one, yeah.
Yeah, and it tanked. The failure rate was incredibly high. And I mean,
the failure rate's still incredibly high.
Well, yeah.
Envision model was rushed to market prematurely, which some machines are. Don't do it.
Yeah,
get your stuff together before you do it.
I mean, I get it if it's software and you push it out and something's buggy. It's easy to patch that. Hardware is very difficult to patch if you get that wrong.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah.
So by rolling up the market, then 3D would be able to eliminate archaic systems, introduce the end user to the latest technologies, and most importantly, build a relationship with the folks that actually benefited from the power of 3D printing, the end user. Theoretically, it was genius. However, as theory seldom converts into reality, other forces came into being, causing change in purpose. As an opinionated guy that built his career in this industry, if it were not for the Service Bureau roll-up that created an acquisition spree, then 3D would have never garnered the interest of the public markets, which pumped huge money into the system. Some more acquisitions, IPOs such as X1, VoxelJet, and Materialize, and mergers, Stratasys and Objet, could take place. This was all good. The bad was the horrible editorials based on unfounded, futuristic hope hype that has created a negative impression for one of the most significant technologies of our time. That last paragraph, I think, is absolutely huge. Not even in relation to this article, but just the 3D printing industry in general. So I mean, in a sense, Avi almost kicked off a bubble, almost like a buying spree, where he started buying up companies, and when he started buying up companies, that made everyone else wonder, okay, well, why is there money being thrown at this? There must be something in it. And then you have...
So he's already creating the hype.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Avi is really responsible for a large part of the 3D printing hype. Now, the desktop market, Avi had very little to do with.
Yes,
3D Systems was late to the desktop market game, but it did help boost Stratasys and Objet, VoxelJet, X1, all that stuff. I mean, it maybe brought more attention to 3D printing.
But what we should maybe look at too is maybe the evolution of modeling softwares during this time. Modeling software started to pick up, become better and better and better, and now you have those 3D models that you can 3D print. So I don't know if it's technically him as the driver in the car. Yeah. I think there's something here that's missing that's software related, primarily on the Autodesk Pro Engineer and SolidWorks side, that actually started to bring 3D printing a little bit more up in...
it made 3D drafting more possible.
Yes, because now all of a sudden you have people that are local companies that can afford a $4,000 package of Autodesk Inventor, where they can go and design something. So in my opinion, I don't think he really kicked it off in this. I think there's something outside of what he did. I think this contributed, but I think there's something else outside.
The other big part in this last paragraph is the hope hype articles. Now, I think every major news outlet is guilty of that.
Yes.
3D printing just was oversold on what it was going to be capable of. Now, the thing is, a lot of the capabilities that were oversold, they're things that can happen, but for example, people don't realize the amount of time it takes to 3D print something. Now, that's improving, but that's only been recently. People were just thinking, okay, 3D printing is going to replace traditional manufacturing, and it's not.
No, we talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that many times before. Now, the comment below this one says that a lot of these hope hype articles had direct quotes from Avi in them. So Avi was contributing to a lot of these hope hype articles. All right, I'm going to continue reading on this, and I swear we're almost done with this comment. Back to Abe. My point is to provide credit where credit is due. While he may have done a lot of bad, he did do some things that were good. To me, this is another example of how inept boards are in protecting shareholders. It might be interesting to research the rewards of some of the directors to understand balance. This is not an I Love Abe review. It's based on direct experience in understanding the situation at the time and appreciating the decisions that had to be made as the CEO of a very challenged company. I respect those that can make the hard decisions because that is a primary responsibility of the CEO. The motivations behind my comments were to provide some insight into how situations such as the 3D printing hype cycle occurred. The time frame for these comments are from 2003 to 2010. So this isn't really even covering a lot of the acquisitions. It's covering some of them, or that time period where some of the acquisitions were happening. So this is basically the end of the comment. Yeah, it's I mean it. Yeah, you can say that he made some bad decisions and he had some good decisions. It just also Avi is not the company. Yeah. I mean, I get that a lot of stuff trickles down, but whatever management style he had that trickled down to the next tier of managers and the managers below that was not good.
Wasn't healthy at all.
Yeah, because it just seems like it's a very toxic work environment. I mean, and this is big picture 3D printing industry stuff notwithstanding. I mean, it seems like Avi, he had a really good grasp of where the 3D printing industry could go. It just seems like the way of getting there wasn't right. I mean, clearly it wasn't right because of the state that it's in. But he was the captain of the ship during that time. And I mean, you can't pin everything on him, and you shouldn't pin everything on him, but at the same time, he was the one leading the company. And some years making $10 million a year doing that.
Yeah, I mean, he had his, where is it at here? It's somewhere.
Are you getting to the point where he sold a lot of his shares when the value was high?
That was an interesting one, but
there's another lawsuit about that.
There is, but also if you look at, if you look at that section, the 4.5 million, which the employees sold over the collective, I think 300 million or something that was made in shares that year. I mean, it's a small percentage. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it was a small percentage. So it was kind of interesting to see that, hey, they made this much in stocks, and then these people, this many were sold by employees only. So I don't think. I think that's a contributor, but I don't think it's a big issue. Right. But I mean, if you look at his salary over the last 2012, 2013, 2014, it goes 6, 10, and 6 million. And then from there you have...
And that's probably not including stock options.
Their senior VP went from 3, 5 to 500, 3 mil, 5 mil to half a mil. And then Theodore Hall must be a relative.
I think it's Chuck's nephew or son.
Because that's what in a lot of the Glassdoor they say, why is your kid in the office, or something like that. There's a comment to like a family kind of thing going on.
A little nepotism going on.
Yeah, in 2014 alone, it recorded at him at 2.2, where the previous years he didn't have anything. So maybe he just got brought on. But it's interesting, and the price ranges that 3D Systems were paying, engineers were 60 to 80K. That's a typical range that that we see. And then for entry-level employees, somewhere around 26. That's a little low. Yeah. And then for customer service and sales employees, around 48. But with that 48, is that with commissions or not? I'm not sure, since they're a reseller base, not direct. But they're. And then this doesn't really have, the rest of the board members, what they're making.
Yeah.
So they could be upwards of that 6 to 10 range.
And in a lot of cases, I think the board members, it's a lot of what the stock, it almost all, I think a large part of their compensation package is in stock options, because they want the company to have a higher stock price. So clearly they want the company to perform well. But so just one more comment here, and this one is a follow-up to Ron's comment. So let's see here. They say this article is really accurate. Ron, despite some high-level decisions that may have been visionary on the CEO's part, and I'll give respect where it is due, any gain was left to rot on the vine. He allowed the organization to run so dysfunctionally that it became a comedy of errors. I think he believed that 3D printers also printed money and we could ignore business basics. Every decision, every approval, every hire that I saw while there would take months to happen. Integrating acquisitions? Right, it was just ludicrous. Working there was like owning a Ferrari but not changing the oil or rotating the tires for 50,000 miles. Simple stuff. It could go so fast if it wasn't smoking on the side of the road. It wasn't a secret, everyone knew it, and people that could affect change just didn't care. It's really that simple. I sincerely believe the departure of the CEO was the way this company has a chance, and I really hope they find an awesome replacement to turn the ship around. Still have many friends there, and for their sake, I hope for the best. I do think it will turn around now, and I think the stock, product line, and performance will be on the upswing. It won't be fast, but I think it will be. I think that kind of sums up our thoughts on it too.
Yeah.
I mean, again, Avi, he had a vision. It's just the execution wasn't great, and I mean, I guess that's
you got to be a team.
It's a good analogy, like owning a Ferrari but not changing the oil or tires for 50,000 miles. So much potential there, but if
Or
it's
not
not
washing
taken
the
care
car, doing that TLC with the vehicle, you're not taking care of it.
Yeah, and so that commenter, it sounded like he used to work at 3D Systems. So I don't know.
Joe.
I mean, we hope the best too for 3D Systems. I'm hoping that with the right CEO, they can get things turned around, and because
the right management, and
there's
the right team,
there's so
and
much
the right attitude.
there's so much potential there. Now it's probably going to take 2 to 5 years to do that, but
at least start. I think this is the start of that, but keep working towards that because you got some great stuff coming out. People are excited about it. Now deliver and make sure when you deliver it works, and not a 70% failure rate or a 30% failure rate. Make sure it's a 10% failure rate. And make sure the software is where it should be, because that was one of the hindrances that we had seen early on, the software wasn't there.
With the Cube Pro. And the problem with that is that it probably wasn't being actively developed like it should have been. Again, probably mismanagement, the cause of that. But again, we just hope everything will work out okay. I think that about wraps it up for this article. I hope that you found it interesting and informative. We'll have the link to the original article down in the show notes. Another thing we're going to have down in the show notes, so this is our Freedom Rabbit. We still don't have a name for him yet, but he is on Thingiverse. And Eric, what should the link will be down in the...
Freedom Rabbit.
Yeah, so it's Freedom Rabbit on Thingiverse, and it'll also be down in the show notes. I guess just basic housekeeping stuff, Jake, unless you've got anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay, so we're just about to go into Thanksgiving, so if you catch this as it's as you're on your Thanksgiving break, we hope you enjoy your holiday. It might be another eat a lot of food, and just make sure that you take a break
and avoid that one cousin that you don't want to talk to.
Yeah,
it never turns out well.
But also make sure that you just relax and hopefully get some 3D printing in over the holiday break.
How many weeks until CES? Can we do a countdown to CES?
5.5 right now.
5 more podcasts before we go to CES.
Yeah, and Eric's
excited.
And this year Eric's going to be coming with us. So we're going to have a nice camera, someone who's, we're going to get some awesome interviews, awesome footage, pictures, all that good stuff.
So we can see what CES plans to do and maybe even capture that on camera for you guys so you can actually hear them say it. Whether it's more hype or not, we'll find out.
Yeah,
but
that way you hear it directly from them and not just through us. Whether you like us or not, at least then you know that it's not us just making stuff up. We wouldn't do that, but...
We don't make stuff up.
Hopefully it makes you feel
We make this
better.
Stuff up.
Well, yeah, that's
called designing.
Not that design. Someone else made that up.
I know, but Eric made this.
Yeah. Anyway, on behalf of Jake and I, we want to thank you for watching and or listening to this episode of the Fargo 3D Printing Show. If you haven't already, please subscribe below. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. We're on Instagram as well. Google+, but I think we do some stuff there too. Anyway, if you have any questions or ideas for the next podcast topic, or if you have feedback on this podcast, we have a feeling that you will, just throw it down in the comments and we'll get to it.
And if you are one of the employees of this and you want to add some more insight to this, or want to maybe even be on the podcast to talk about some of that, we can do maybe a phone call or something. I know we've been talking about that. So get in touch.
Yeah. So again, on behalf of both Jake and I, thanks for watching. Ron Hollis. Ron Hollis.
No, it was Rondell Barnico.
Who is Ron Hollis?
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Let me check on that.
No, not Marshall, who's
I
Ron
found
Hollis.
this on the web for Marshall, who is Ron Hollis.
How would you just like
You're
type
just
it like
the-
a regular human
well,
being?
the thing is, Google is so much better at this. Siri is just, okay, hold on. Ron Hollis.
Did you mean Ron Pops?
No. All right. All right.
Ron
All right,
Paul.
we're done with that. Eric, you can go ahead and cut this part out. Have this as the little bonus afterwards clip.
Who is Ron Hollis?